I've analyzed every single racing lap of the 2026 Formula One season so far, and this year that means something very different. Because 2026 is not just another season. It's the biggest reset Formula One has had in years. New cars, new aerodynamic philosophy, much more electrical power, active aero, lighter chassis, sustainable fuel, and a grid that's been completely scrambled by it all. The FIA's goal was to make the cars smaller, around 30 kilograms lighter, more agile, and more dependent on driver execution, while also introducing active front and rear wings and a much bigger electrical contribution from the power unit Formula One. So in a season where the machinery has changed this much, the big question is simple: who is actually driving the best? Now, if you just look at the standings, you'd probably say Kimi Antonelli, and to be fair, that's not a bad place to start. He's leading the championship, Mercedes are leading the constructors, and for a rookie-era storyline to become a title-level campaign, this quickly is ridiculous Formula One. But as always, standings only tell you who has scored the most points. They don't tell you who's extracting the most from the car, who's been the cleanest over a lap, or who has actually adapted best to the weirdness of these new regulations. And 2026 is full of weirdness. These cars can switch aerodynamic states, the battery deployment matters more than ever, and getting the tire window right under a radically different platform has become half the battle Formula One. So to rank the drivers properly, I'm not just using finishing positions. I've broken performance into 4 categories. First, qualifying extraction. Second, race pace consistency. Third, lap 1 execution and racecraft. And fourth, conversion basically, when a driver gets a big result on Saturday. How often do they cash it in on Sunday? None of these are perfect on their own, but together they paint a much better picture of actual driver performance than points alone, and by the end, we'll combine them into one final ranking. Let's start with qualifying, because in 2026, that might matter more than ever. With these new regulations, the cars are lighter, smaller, and less draggy in certain aero modes, which means confidence and commitment have become massive differentiators Formula One. The best way to measure that isn't just raw grid position, because again, car performance gets in the way. Instead, I'm looking at how much time each driver leaves on the table versus their theoretical best lap. In other words, when the sectors are all there, who actually hooks them up? That's where you separate the drivers who are fast from the drivers who are precise. And this season, that difference has been huge. Some drivers are repeatedly getting close to their maximum immediately, while others are still having those weekends where one tiny mistake in the final sector turns a front row lap into P6. Then there's race pace consistency, and for me this is the backbone of the whole ranking. Anybody can look brilliant for 3 laps. The best drivers are the ones who can sit on the knife edge for an entire stint without burning the tires, overcooking the battery deployment, or falling apart once the balance shifts. And in 2026, balance shifts constantly. With the new car concept, the tire behavior is less predictable, the energy management matters more, and the gap between a clean lap and a messy lap can open up very quickly Formula One. So I've looked at stint-by-stint lap time variation, rather than just total race time, because a driver managing a difficult car through changing fuel loads and tire phases tells us a lot more than a final classification ever will. And this is where the field starts splitting into really interesting groups. You've got the headline guys, the championship names, who are obviously scoring, but then you've also got drivers who are quietly maximizing weekends even when the car beneath them isn't the class of the field. That's why this exercise gets so interesting. A driver in the 3rd fastest car, who qualifies within a whisper of the maximum, protects the tires, and gains places on lap 1 might actually be driving at a higher level than someone winning races in the best package. The 2026 rules were supposed to put more emphasis back on driver skill, and if anything, that's exactly what's happened Formula One. Now lap 1. This is the chaos category, because you can simulate qualifying, you can model race pace, but lap 1 is where instinct takes over. Braking judgment, positioning, risk management, awareness, all of it matters here. And I actually think lap 1 performance is one of the best quick indicators of racecraft because there's nowhere to hide. Either you place the car well, anticipate the squeeze, and survive or gain, or you don't. The really impressive drivers aren't always the ones making the biggest lunges. They're the ones that consistently emerge from lap 1 in a better position than they started, or at the very least, exactly where they should be. That kind of repeatable aggression is incredibly hard to quantify, but when you track it over multiple rounds, patterns appear fast. Then we get to conversion, which is probably the messiest metric, but still worth including. Because there's a huge difference between looking quick and actually closing the deal. In a season like this, where teams are still learning these regulations and setup windows can swing massively from Saturday to Sunday, converting strong starting positions has become its own skill. Some drivers are turning opportunities into trophies. Others are losing them through poor starts, tire drop-off, strategy sensitivity, or just being slightly less decisive when the race gets complicated. And in a year where Mercedes have come out so strong, with Antonelli leading the standings and Russell right there too, conversion has been a massive part of why they've built that early advantage Formula One. So who's actually been the best? If I had to summarize the season so far in one line, it's this: 2026 hasn't rewarded the flashiest driver, it's rewarded the most complete one. The driver who adapts quickest, wastes the fewest laps, and strings weekends together without the unnecessary noise. That's why Antonelli's rise matters so much. Leading a championship in a brand new rules era is one thing. Doing it while the whole grid is relearning how Formula One works is another Formula One. But equally, the real stars of this season are not just the drivers on the podium every Sunday. They're the ones whose data keeps popping up everywhere, in qualifying efficiency, in stint consistency, in lap 1 gains, and in how rarely they leave performance on the table. And honestly, that's what makes 2026 such a brilliant season to analyze. The regulations were designed to create lighter, more agile cars, with more electrical deployment, active aero, and a stronger link between efficiency and outright speed Formula One. In theory, that should expose drivers more clearly. In practice, it absolutely has. The margins look tiny on paper, but over hundreds and hundreds of laps, they become impossible to ignore. A 10th in qualifying here, 2 clean laps in a stint there, 1 decisive lap 1 move, 1 race where you convert instead of fade, stack enough of those together, and suddenly the best driver conversation looks very different from the standings. So that's the goal of this video. Not to tell you who has the best car, not even to tell you who has the most points, but to answer the much more interesting question: who has actually driven the best in Formula One 2026 so far? By the end, we'll put every category together, hand out the points, and build a ranking that's as fair, as data-led, and as driver-focused as possible. And trust me, some of the names at the top are exactly who you'd expect, but the order might not be.